What happens when two bass road warriors spend quality time talking music and life with one of their peers? Bassist, educator, author David C. Gross and bassist and head honcho of KnowYourBassPlayer.com, Tom Semioli, trade dates with the legends of rock, jazz, funk, blues, folk, country, and more. Notes from an Artist, revealing conversations with the legends who've created the soundtrack of our lives. What happens? You're about to find out. It's another episode of Notes from an Artist.
Sound trumpet. Let our bloody colors wave, and either a victory or else a grave. David, do you know who wrote those famous words?
I sure do.
Who was that?
Blake Edwards.
Blake Edwards. No, it was Billy Shakespeare, the famous playwright and second baseman for the Chicago Cubs.
You are correct, sir. Yes!
We welcome our listener back tonight for yet another episode of Notes from an Artist That Really Blows.
What have we wrought, people? Karen, how are you tonight? At least you have some sanity.
Yes, that is our listener David is addressing. I am Tom Semioli. I am co-host, along with a fellow that toots his own horn, David C. Gross. David, toot for us.
Toot, toot, toot.
It's been a long day, folks. Anyway, our returning guest is recording and performing artist, composer, trumpeter, Phillies fan, Matt Lavelle. We invited Matt back on the show to discuss his new album, The Crop Circle Suite Part 1, which is credited to Matt Lavelle and the 12 Houses. A deep record inspired by Matt's interest in mathematics, numerology, and crop circle phenomena, which he explains in great detail. David, you really dig this album. You've played with Matt, too.
That's true. And I really do dig the record. It's a great way to spend an afternoon. It's about a little over an hour and 15 minutes. And these 6 suites, the first of 12, takes you through many emotions. It's free jazz. It's not free jazz. It's expensive jazz. It's expansive jazz. It's a really great record. I think accessible to anybody who likes good music and who likes a challenge.
All right, groovy. So we're going to bring Matt in, but first we have to do our plugs, David. You, the audience member, may be listening to David and myself every Monday night on Cygnus Internet Radio. Let me spell that for you, CYGNUS, www.cygnusradio.com. You cue that up on the browser of your choice. You, Karen, may be listening to us on our Notes from an Artist podcast, streaming right this very moment on Apple and wherever podcasts are podificated. And you, the listener, can be you, the viewer. For our YouTube page, oddly enough, we call that Notes from an Artist, so you can watch behind-the-scenes clips with a select number of guests. And of course, be sure to log on to www.notesfromanartist.com to keep up with whatever we're doing at any given moment. David, before we bring Matt in, let's talk about his playlist.
Okay, well, there are songs on it.
There you go, not to go into great detail.
No, we'll save the playlist for the end.
We'll save the playlist. All right, let's bring
I
Matt
want to keep
Lavelle
everyone
in.
guessing.
Keep them guessing. Here's Matt. Let's officially welcome back to the show Matt Lavelle. Matt, you are a returning guest. Congratulations. Good to see you. Thanks, brave enough to make it back. Coming back to Notes from an Artist, being a returning guest, being in that circle is like being in the witness protection program.
You come into my house on the day my daughter's to be married and you ask me to murder money.
I ask you for justice.
That is not justice. Your daughter is still alive.
You're in safe harbor here. Not to worry. For for those of our audience member who don't know who Matt is, he is an acclaimed jazz recording and performing artist. He is a band leader. He is a collaborator. He is a visual artist. He is an author. His book is New York City Subway Drama and Beyond. In 2011, you published that. I think you can write another one, given the New York City subway system. His choices of instrument are, for those of you grammatically correct people out there, trumpet, flugelhorn, alto clarinet, and bass clarinet. Matt has appeared on recordings by Daniel Carter, Bern Nix, Giuseppe Logan, Steve Swell, who we've had on the show, Charlie Waters, and such ensembles as Eye Contact and Sumari. And he's also performed with David C. Gross.
Will you stop, Dave? I'm afraid, Dave.
Wow.
What a checkered past you have. Now you're based in
Boy,
Philly.
that's the one I would definitely not mention too often.
You don't want to do that. You're based in Philadelphia, so I gather you're going to be a Phillies fan, right? Bryce Harper, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler. Philly is an intense town.
Well, the sports thing in Philly is I've never seen any at the level of hardcore sports fan that I've seen in Philly. I mean, I lived in New York a long time, but Philly fans are on another level, across the board, especially with the Eagles. They are extremists.
What's interesting about Philadelphia, and I always love going to see the Phillies when they come to New York, well, and they beat the Mets like they just did. Philadelphia, opposing players never like to play in Philly. You don't, and whenever you read sports biographies, the one city they didn't want to play in was Philadelphia because the fans were so intense.
We actually have a jazz scene out here that, to my mind, actually not only rivals, but in some ways is superior to the New York scene. And I said, and I lived in New York for 30 years. So, but I'm not trying to start a tribal war. Philly jazz scene is no joke.
So let's talk about that a little bit. Why do you think Philadelphia emerged as a jazz center? I mean, it was always a hotbed of musical creativity.
Well, a lot of the great musicians that we know came from Philly. Like at one point, Art Blakey's whole band was from Philly at one point. Lee Morgan and Coltrane, Philly guys. I mean, I drove by Train's house in Philly just the other day, and I just pulled over and took some pictures and was just in awe. It's a row house just like the house I'm in right now. It's like a Philadelphia thing. The thing is that the musicians in Philly take music very seriously. Don't feel like they need to go to New York, prove themselves or be part of that thing. And as New York is becoming more and more hard for anybody to make it financially, Philly is right there. And not that Philly doesn't have its own gentrification thing going on, it does, but it's way further back than New York, where Hell's Kitchen has been reduced to almost like one block.
I would imagine, in Philadelphia, the surrounding areas they're more affordable than, let's say, the boroughs of Manhattan, and certainly even the suburbs of Manhattan. Westchester and Long Island are not cheap.
And there is places to play, and the audiences are different. This is the biggest thing that I've noticed is, a lot of times, especially in the scenes that I play in New York, it's always the same kind of people. In Philly, you'll see people from all different backgrounds, all different neighborhoods, and really listening, really into the music. And if you believe in what you're doing and you mean what you say, they feel it. They get behind and support you. Whereas a lot of times in New York, there's just a few people on their phone.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, Matt, the last time we played together at that place on 14th Street, a woman came up to Tom and said,
I want to thank you for those beautiful flowers. They were lovely. And don't forget, come up and see me sometime.
This is really accessible music. And she's primarily a punk rocker, for want of anything better, but she was able to listen and get something. And that, I think, is important. And I think that's people's ears are opening up more now, whether it be Philly or where have you, because what people are being given at present, everything from Taylor Swift to Dua Lipa.
Dua Lipa, David.
I can handle things. I'm smart. I'm like everybody says. Like dumb. I'm smart and I want respect.
As you know, and we've spoken about this in the past too, the most honest music out today is pretty well the avant-garde jazz scene. And I don't even know if you could call it avant-garde anymore, because if people in the punk scene are saying, hey, this is accessible, it just doesn't have words. Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing.
That's very interesting. And in fact, that last gig that we did, I remember people came in that were not there to see us, but they heard something, and people started coming in from the bar and from outside. The audience was growing and they were really listening.
Yeah.
They had at a certain point, it was almost like they were enraptured. It was like it's very interesting what you're saying is like today's culture, especially in the younger generation, where I don't want to call it woke or anything, go that hard on a category thing, but there is a thing where people across the board are attempting to be more open and less judgmental about everything. And as part of that, they may be willing or more open to check out the kind of stuff that I do and give it a chance. And then, just like you said, realize that it's not this impossible thing to get that some people think it is. In particular, like my record is actually very accessible.
Very much so. But then you're looking at two other guys who are into that kind of music, so it was accessible to us, even if it wasn't accessible to anybody else.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things about this record is you get into details like we used to have on album covers.
Liner notes.
Unfortunately, my arms aren't long enough, but a lot of what is in that really describes your whole process. So to make it easier for people who have glasses, we should really talk about each of the 6 movements. Folks, this is called Matt Lavelle and the 12 Houses, and this is volume 1. So there are 6 tracks on this. The good news is we're only allowed to play 4 of them, but I'm going to pick the 4 best, and one of them is the first one that happens to be 30 minutes long, so you can get a chance to listen to a lot of Lavelle, an awful lot, which is great, which is excellent. So, Tom, let's begin.
Matt, start off, explain the crop circles phenomenon. What is that in layman terms?
Okay, so that's a great question because it's a complicated answer. And I've studied the whole crop circles thing pretty extensively. And a lot of people are quick to debunk it and say it's a hoax. There's people that made those. The whole thing is just people trying to just gaslight the whole world or something like that. It has been proven that people can do it. There are people that have done it, and there have been crop circles made that were made purposely to trick people or to get, but that's not all of them. There's a small number of those. Before those, the actual crop circle phenomenon was something that people still will not ever be able to really explain how these things would appear. And not just appear, but be so precise and have so much mathematical, also metaphysical, but mostly math and numerology information built into these things. So where did they come from? Who did it? And what's that all about? So my thing is to actually try to look at the information may or may not be in there. I mean, for mathematicians and people in the sacred geometry, we see tons and tons of stuff in there. And it's stuff that would be far beyond the agenda of someone trying to do a hoax. And there's some questionable crop circles too. It's like, well, is that, there's one with like an alien face. So I question that one. There's the one with the face of an alien. Maybe that is part of the actual thing, but I'm suspect of that one. But the other ones, in particularly numbers 1 to 12, it's all about sacred geometry, and which is it's kind of a far out subject. And I'm definitely not Einstein or Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I am into math on a basic level and numerology. So what this music is all about is us, meaning musicians, being honest with ourselves about how much of music is math. But Western music theory, 12 notes, and in particular the intervals, because the intervals is really what I'm doubling down on throughout this music. Is I'm taking numerology and then exploiting it or making it the entire focus of each one. So Crop Circle 4 is all about fourths. Fourths in music. I mean, C to F. I mean, Woody Shaw was a master trumpet player who incorporated and used fourths in his solos, but it's also about the harmonies. Herbie Hancock was
McCoy Tyner.
McCoy Tyner.
Joe Henderson, what was that song? Inner Urge?
Right.
I mean, really, that's sort of like Freedom Jazz Dance, Eddie Harris. That's fourths too.
Yeah, it's like taking that idea, but then going all in with it with a large ensemble and just taking it to the max. So the melody, bar lines, the structure is pushed to the limits. It's a lot of fun because when you do that, you each time you do that and you stay on there, there's a sound. There's a real identity. If you're really drilling down on whole tones or fifths or sixths, it's a lot of fun to work with. But it's also the kind of thing I've musically been obsessed with intervals my whole life. I mean, I've been more into, I'm not so much into chordal harmony as I'm into intervals. Even when I improvise, it's all about It's all intervals. My whole concept and my whole language is just about intervals.
Yeah, yeah. When you think about it, my concept on six-string bass is very much the same. How many intervals can I get at in one position and things like that? But the interesting thing about the fourths is you're given a set of limitations and you become more creative. It's funny, Tom, you're thinking about what Jerry Jamad said about the limits of a four-string bass.
Yes.
But the reality here is that if you're in a quote unquote fourths world, you have to think a lot harder to create within that structure.
I think the reason I can do it in this context is because of the musicians that I have, my own training, if you will, with Ornette. So it opens you up to the point where, I mean, the first thing with Ornette is you ditch chord progressions. Chords are cool, but progressions are gone. So I've been playing and collaborating and doing everything with people in that kind of a framework for a long time. So everybody in the band is comfortable playing and improvising in an environment free of progression. The reason it's fun is because I still swing. And this is one of the core concepts of what I do and what the record is about, is how important rhythm is. And bass players know that if the drums aren't there, they become the rhythm section and bass becomes everything. But I've noticed over the years, if the rhythm section is popping, if the rhythm section has a groove or a vibe, you can do almost anything and people will be into it. The first time I tried it was I worked at Tower Records and I was the jazz bar at Tower Records, and I had a performance series there at Lincoln Center, Jazz at Lincoln Center. There was this one time, there was a great bass player that, now this guy would be somebody to research. This guy is almost just a legend at this point. His name was Tubman Namara. He was a Creole guy from the South, came to New York, played electric bass, and he could really groove. He was a great improviser. At a certain point, he left and disappeared, and I don't know what happened to him. The cat, he's off the grid. He's not on social media. He had a drummer, a friend of his. Two of them were like, the classic bass and drums team, like where they were, like with the two of them together, had a thing where they could just kick it and had a whole thing happening unto themselves. Like Elvin Jones and Jimmy Garrison, or William Parker and Hamid Drake. When that connection is made, these guys just become a force unto themselves. And like William Parker and Hamid Drake is one of the most powerful duos in the universe, as an example. So, but at this thing at Tower Records, I got my friend Ross Moshe, and Ross has been playing, Ross played with David recently, and Ross and I played with Tubman and his friends. And we just played totally free. But Tubman and his friends' free concept was grooves. And from all over the map, everything had a pop to it. I mean, you could say it was jazz or hip hop or swing or whatever. It was their own thing. And Ross and I were playing totally free and playing hard. Ross and I could be very melodic when we play free. But in this particular instance, we can turn it on like in Crop Circle 5, Ross and I can turn it on and go fully free, fully hardcore, abstract, all in energy improvisation. And we did that, and Tubman and I'm sorry, I don't remember the guy's name. Tubman and his friend just kept that rhythm going, and we ended up with a huge crowd, and the people were vibing, and the reason it was working was, I'm beyond convinced, it's because of the rhythm that was happening. And I mean, Ross and I were just screaming all over this thing. People were down because they could feel the pulse. See, it's like a human kind of thing. My own thing is, I love free jazz, but if you look at Ornette's rhythm section and his drummers in the earlier part of his career and beyond, those guys they all had a groove happening, even if it wasn't in straight time. There's a feeling there, like when Donardo Coleman plays, especially now, this might not be strict time, but there's a feeling, there's a vibe, there's a swing there. Billy Higgins, of course. My whole thing is I like to have something connected to that going on. And if I do break it out and go totally free, I try to do it, but then bring it back. My whole thing is that there's so much improv happening right now, especially in New York. There's so much improv. There's so many labels going totally free, total improv. And a lot of these things don't have any drums at all. And it's so, and I love improv too. I love to do it, but the sheer amount of records coming out now of total improv is just staggering. I mean, every day there's several releases coming out of improv from all over the map. A lot of the writers and critics, they have thousands and thousands of things to try to review. They can only review so many. There's so much improv. And my thing is, I've done several records of all improv. I've watched audiences and I've watched how people react in situations like that. And I can see people trying to listen. I can see people trying to understand what's going on. I can see people trying to feel what's going on. Some people get it, some don't. When you give people something to hold on to, they turn on and they're much more open to getting into what it is that you're trying to do. And the same thing comes with like the emotional expression. If you're doing improv, but you really feel what you're doing, and you're doing what they say in jazz, the so-called telling a story, then people will be with you on that. If there's people doing improv where there's no actual rhythm happening and there's no story, it's like looking at a calculus equation that you can't solve. You can appreciate it, but you might get it, you might not. So my record is trying to take all the complexity and all the deepest levels of what can happen in free jazz context, bring it down to earth so we can all check it out. It's like, here's the perfect fifth. It was like, here is what the most ultimate thing of perfect fifth you could ever experience. And you might see fifths in the crop circles, but crop circle 5 is just fifths, right?
Uh-huh.
And there are parts of crop circle 5 where the whole band is playing free. And that's, for me, I see music in a very, like, from the perspective of a writer or a soundtrack, even in a free jazz context. So to me, if the whole band is going to be playing free, there's got to be a reason for that. You got to build up to that and make that an event and make that part of the story, not just everybody play free the whole time. Instead of everybody play free the whole time, which would burn out a lot of people anyway, instead of doing that, why not set the stage for that? Build up to that so that when everybody plays free, it's like, whoa, this is such a serious moment that we all need to bust out at this time. And we need to all go for it at once. There's a reason why we are doing this. And then by going about it that way, to me, it means more when you do it. If you set the stage for something like, and give everybody a reason for a whole group of people to play free, it means something. And then it has to go somewhere. So in a band like the 12 Houses, I'm in the front, like Butch Morris or Jamil Mundak or
Right.
even the great Sun Ra. I'm in the front trying, Duke Ellington called it like being the traffic cop. Build it, you push it. And then it's all about timing, where you want to hit a moment like that, but then have it last for the right amount of time, and then have it go somewhere and let it go into something else. And then let people resolve from that experience. In a way, this record is a blatant attempt to invite and include the listener and the audience into this kind of world without just telling them to blow off and just, you know, a lot of people, I've seen improv musicians approach music and do concerts where the whole vibe is completely anti-audience. The whole vibe is it's all about us. We don't care whether you get it or not. They don't talk to the audience. They just play. Everybody congratulates themselves at the end, and they don't even try to communicate or talk to the audience at all. It's the whole thing is either you get it or you don't, and we don't care if you hear or if you listen or not. My thing is the opposite of that. I'm trying to actually bring people into this world and show them an entire other universe. So like a Crop Circle 5 is probably my favorite because I'm able to, the whole band's playing free at one point, but then I bring everybody back to fifths. So you got like 18 people, and we are hitting fifths strong. Now when you hit a perfect fifth is very strong on its own. If you just go to a piano and play C and G, boom, boom, it's very strong. It's almost like this royalty kind of thing. It's almost like, you know, bum, bum. It's like, you know, the king has arrived kind of thing. That's the other thing about that I'm so into intervals is the sound of certain intervals implies so much other things. Why does a perfect fifth in life? Why does a perfect fifth make you feel like the king has entered the room or something like that?
However, the thing about the perfect fifth, not to get all theoretical, does not tell you if you're major or minor. So if you put a flat 3 in, it's going to change that royalty to something else. If you put a major 3 in, It resolves differently. And that's the cool thing about it. The other thing about it, that fifths are actually fourths inverted. And so when you do your fourths, you're doing fifths inverted, which is kind of a cool thing. And if we really want to go metaphysical, the Rosicrucians were talking about this stuff long time ago, because they called it the music of the spheres, which is where the crop circles really come in to play, because it is, and you would hope that it is, that the ones that weren't meant for TikTok or Instagram, there is actually something metaphysical about it. And you'd have to think that, because many years ago, I read a book called Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Däniken, and he was talking about saucers and all that stuff landing. And he made a point of talking about, in the mountains of Peru, there aren't crop circles, but there are definite designs that there's no way somebody would have gone up. It had to be done from somewhere else, which is the whole premise, I guess, with the crop circles as well.
Exactly. And man, I really love what you said, man, about perfect fifth is not major or minor. Man, that is that is one of the best things because I never even thought about, or I never thought about that or realized that, but that is the gold right there, because something like that, that's the kind of stuff that Ornette was looking for. That's the kind of because Ornette was basically a scientist of sound, of what's happening that we can't see. And he would take music theory apart like a surgeon. I mean, he was obsessed with finding stuff like that, something just like that. Perfect fifth, it's not minor or major. So what's up with that? So he said that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm into. That's the whole in some way what I'm doing is a continuation of the research that Ornette was doing. He was like in some way I've taken the questions that he would ask, and I'm moving them outside of the context of the environment of music theory itself, or trying to find the connections between the two. And when Ornette and when I was hanging out with him, that's what we were talking about. We were talking about these kind of things. In fact, this brings me back to the whole reason the 12 houses exist, which is because I was talking to Ornette about music in general and broad philosophical concepts. And the discussion was about, and he initiated the idea that the biggest problem in music that he thought was, if not the world, was the lack of balance between male and female energy. And he said, wouldn't it be, like, he proposed an idea. He said, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a large ensemble, but it was equally men and women? And we thought about it. It was like, can't think of a band like this in existence. There's all female big bands. Most of the big bands are 95% men. The Jazz at Lincoln Center was all men until they came under fire for having no women. After like 20 years, they ended up adding a woman. I think mostly because people were going to cancel their ass for being like that. And they held out as long as they could, but eventually they had a woman in the band. I took what Ornette was saying and I was like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it and let's see what happens. So I've always tried to have an equal amount of women and men in the band. And if you look at the personnel, sometimes I can't exactly get like 9 and 9. Sometimes it fluctuates, but there is almost at least half of the band is women, and one of the sections is all women, because there's different sections in the band.
Right, with the classical string quartet.
Yeah, there's one section that is entirely women, and there's women in every section. There's a woman in the brass section. There's 2 women in the reed section. The only time that doesn't happen is the rhythm section. Once I figure out how to fix that, I will.
The last time we played together, Cheryl played with us.
There you go. And Cheryl's passionate about that.
Yeah, and when you listen to, what is it, the second or the third, where she and who was playing bass flute?
Okay, so the second piece opens up with Cheryl and Mary playing alto and bass flute. Yeah.
But here's the thing, because you were talking about it in realms of the sounds of birds, the sounds of nature, and immediately struck me, because one of the reasons that Eric Dolphy, who I love to death, always sound a little out of tune is because when he was growing up, he used to sit in his backyard and play with the birds.
Yeah.
And so the birds were never strict harmony. The birds had, and I think one of Eric Dolphy's strongest points was the fact that when he played an A, it was some form of an A, and it worked with everyone else, but he had a quality that was different, and a lot of it had to do, Oliver Messiaen. Some of his stuff was written specifically because of the birds, and you incorporate that. I guess it's house too. Yeah, it's very cool stuff.
Oh man, it's so true about the Byrds. I mean, the Byrds are actually the true. I mean, this might sound too out the box, but the Byrds are actually the greatest harmonic masters of the world because they are free of theory, and they sing and improvise nonstop, and they don't even know what theory is because as soon as we put an A attached to a tone, as soon as we play any sound and then go, well, that's an A, then we're already like there's no turning back from that point for us. But Byrds don't have to worry. Byrds never were. It was never enforced on them that this sound is a B flat.
If it wasn't for stringed instruments, fretted stringed instruments, and keyboards, there'd never be any of an issue. Because you're on an instrument where you got quarter tones. On my fretless bass, I got more tones than God. Well, no, sorry. I've got less than you, but a lot. You know what I'm saying? So
Totally.
it's great stuff.
That's it. That's what I'm trying to get to, that space, the space in the music, and on this record, another thing that I feel is absolutely key if you're going to engage in free jazz or the energy of improvisation is that the emotions have got to be there. It's got to be music from the heart for me. Got to be something that you feel. And Crop Circle 5 again there's dramatic changes in the environment and everything that happens, but the biggest and dramatic, sharp contrast is also part of my creed. Direct, hard contrast is great for the listener, keeps listeners on their toes, and it also shows endings and beginnings. It allows a certain section to end and another section to begin, which is good for listeners too. So Crop Circle 5, at a certain point, Ross and I just keep building and building and building, just erupting in the concept with a very fast, very, very fast rhythm section. Hill Green is almost like a whirlwind. He's walking.
He's fabulous.
Fast.
Yeah.
He's walking so fast that it's lines, but it actually goes beyond metric time, but it's still lines. It's incredible. It's incredible. But this kind of thing erupts and then it culminates and then boom, I cut everybody off and I give the whole thing to one person, which is Chris Forbes on piano. And I had written this thing out for him of all fits because now nobody could explore what I'm talking about more than a piano player. So I mean, you got at least with your hands, you can get 4 fits at one time on the piano. Boom, right? Without computers or electronics or anything like that. So I just wrote something out for Chris and asked him to improvise a ballad at that point using the fits. And he created an entire other universe. But what he did was such a dynamic contrast from where we were. We went from a full band playing at full power on all levels to a solo piano player playing a very introspective, spacious, melodic improvisation based solely on fits. And then so we went from one world right to the next, and it could not be more different. And it was not manipulated or created in the studio. It happened in real time. In fact, almost everything on the 12 Houses record that you hear happens in real time, in the moment. These are things that I created that happened just as you hear them. I didn't make this and then put them together in the studio. The only time I did that was on the first one because it's so long. The first one is only a half hour long. I did record that one in sections because there was too many sections, and some of the transitions I needed to stop and start again myself because Crop Circle 1, there's a section where it goes from sax quartet to brass quartet to string quartet.
Strings,
but each section has a different rhythm. So on that one I had to do separately and merge them. On all of the others, those are all complete takes, usually second takes of the whole thing because
that's great. You got me thinking of this fifths thing, Matt, because if you start on C and you go fifths all the way around, you end up chromatic.
Interesting.
Well, because think about it. C to G, G to D, D to A to E, E to B, B to F sharp to C sharp, to G sharp, and on and on. You hit all 12 notes. even if you're saying strict to the fifths, which is really funny. A couple of days ago, Tom and I were talking about Dave Sanborn, may he rest in peace, his night music show on Sunday nights. And Sun Ra's Facebook page had the clip from, and we're talking 15, think about this, NBC TV on a Sunday night. Granted, not everyone's watching on Sunday night, but 15 minutes of Sun Ra. And another guy who spent most of his life in Philly. And I'm not comparing, but there's a certain quality in what you were doing in the 12 houses that has that same density that Sun Ra was doing. It's great. I recommend this CD for everybody. I think everyone should get a shot at this. I think it's a great record. One of the things I did want to talk about is you've got this big 112-piece performance you're doing. Tell us about that.
This is really wild. So a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine, had the idea to expand 12 houses through the organizations Make Music New York. I forget, there's two organizations involved. I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but the idea was a public performance with a massive or giant group. So the idea was to take 12 houses and add 100 musicians. So I said, I'm down to do it. And then it was like, because they can get the permits and actually make something like that happen. I had an idea to do this a while ago. I was going to try to do it on my own and then a few months before COVID hit, and I had to let that go, because COVID just took over the world. But I have been thinking about something like this all the way back to the beginning, and here was a chance to actually do it. So then the idea was, well, where? So Astoria Park, down there by the river under the RFK Bridge, is where I spent years playing side. I mean, I spent thousands of hours playing out there. That was where I did most of my practicing while I was living in Astoria, Queens for years. They have an area there under the bridge, this large grassy area, which is actually just about the perfect size to attempt something like this. So the idea became a reality. And right now the challenge is to get 112 musicians. Anybody that's out there that's interested, it's wide open. Students, doesn't have to be hardcore improvisers. It can be musicians from any scene, any genre. You don't have to be a free jazz person. You could be a classical musician. You could be a student. You could be a reggae musician. You could be any kind of musician that exists. Because what this is about really is not about me premiering some great piece for a giant orchestra. It's about what can happen when a huge group of musicians get together with the same intent, the same energy. As I've had 12 houses for the last 12 plus years, but during that time I've done music, like I've done pieces called No More Hate, No More Greed, No More Hypocrisy, No More Guns, this kind of thing. I've tried to do my own kind of musical activism over the years. I had pieces like, I had a piece called Sandra Bland, I had a piece called Tamir Rice. I had a piece for Trayvon Martin. I realized that if we're going to get this amount of musicians together, then this is a chance energetically for us to do something. Because if you're going to have that many people together, it certainly can't be about me. It's got to be about, not to use Joe Biden, but it's not about me. It's about us. Not to use Joe's line, but it actually really is about, and my intent is not to drill down and isolate any particular thing, to villainize any particular group. My thing is much broader about the human issue. In other words, everything that's, without saying anything about who's right, Israel versus Palestine, without saying anything at all. For me, what's the broader issue there is greed. Is the money being made off of the war, is off of war, the money being made off of war. To me, that's the broader issue, is there are human beings that are making money off of what's going down over there, without trying to say anything about why all that violence is happening. There are people making money off of it. So that's my thing, is we can just simply have 100, and I'm not talking about not talking about protesting either. It's not a protest. It's what we can do with music energetically. With, if there's 100 people and we're all saying no more greed or no more hate, this kind of thing. It's like a broad concept that seems to that the whole human race seems to suffer from. So I've learned that when you go large, when you go large with groups, if it's not about you, it's about everybody. I realized that if I'm going to conduct that many people at one time, that energetically, that's what I feel like the energy should be about. And the crop circles, coming full circle, the crop circles are
Don't be scared.
the crop circles are essentially the same exact thing, because whatever they are, somebody somehow, whether it's from the future, from a higher dimension, whatever it is, there are messages there talking about unity, about working together. The circle is everybody. For better or for worse, the circle is everybody. The circle is the whole planet. Everybody on the planet is in the circle. Everybody that exists that we know of is on Earth. It's a circle. It's like, and at some point, sooner or later, we're going to have to figure out how to get along. So musically, the 12 houses of astrology is another circle, is basically saying, we're all in this together. Somehow we're gonna have to learn how to come off of the faction and tribal war shit. We're all just gonna have to figure out how to be human beings at some point. That's basically what the whole record is about. Basically asking the whole human race to grow the fuck up.
You mentioned in the liner notes, Crop Circles is a musical presentation of the meaning of your life. Crop Circles is sweet, is an attempt to musically see and feel and understand human life, and music is the bridge between science and art. So it all comes together.
That came to me while I was writing, and I was almost stunned by what I actually wrote. But I think it makes sense. It's because it comes back to the math again, because that's the tricky thing. There is nature in math with the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio and stuff like this. There's, like, if you look at a sunflower, it's kind of hard to explain. There's math in a sunflower.
There's geometry in it. Yes.
Yeah, sacred geometry. So in that regard, to me, music is both. Music is math/science. It's art. If you're playing music, you're on that bridge between both worlds. It's up to music to save us all. Which is what a lot of Coltrane and Albert Ayler were thinking. And William Parker is a spiritual icon of music. And I learned a lot from him. I was in his big band for a while. He certainly believes in the spiritual power of music. So it's kind of hard to even engage music on that level. It's not for everybody. Not everybody needs or wants to talk to God when they play. Kind of scary thing to do. It's hard for anybody to engage music that way, but some people are compelled to do it. Some people have no choice, like Albert Ayler had no choice. I've done the astrology charts of Albert Ayler and Train and Ornette and stuff like that. And what I learned about science from the actual science part of Albert Ayler's birth chart is he technically had no choice to do anything other than what he did. This kind of transformation thing that he was going through was so intense that it actually drove him right out. It just took him right out of the world. Couldn't even stay. The amount of energy that was in his chart was more than I think any human being could contain. But he did it. I mean, it all came through on the tenor. Like if you see, when Albert Ayler was at full power on tenor, he was dealing with some serious transformational energy. This wasn't a guy just going off. What he was doing came from a very deep place. And he was almost consumed by his sound, and what he was trying to do was so big. And then eventually he was. It's like the same thing happened with Coltrane. Coltrane was trying to keep playing. It was almost like he was going to lift off from the earth and just keep playing himself right into the sky. And he did. He played so much that he out here in Philly. I have a friend of mine that studied with Odin Pope, who studied with Train. And Odin Pope said that nobody practiced more than Train. We've heard about stories like that, but in eyewitness accounts, in the bathroom between sets, in his car before the gig, just literally nonstop. Almost because, and I believe he did know that his time was limited. In Lewis Porter's book on Train, he had looked at his own astrology and knew that his time was limited, which might be one of the reasons he went as hard as he did, because he was on a timer, played himself right into the next world. So somebody like me I'm interested in these things, but I'm not interested in playing myself out of here. I'm trying to get all this down and put it all down and not leave.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
good point to conclude. And part 2, not to rush you, but
Oh yeah, so we got to get to 12. Got to be 1 to 12, 12 houses.
Right.
Also in numerology, it's all about the number 12. So that was 1 to 6, and 7 to 12 have to happen. I have as 7 to 12 are in process. Take a while for that to fully manifest and go to the studio and everything, but
right.
I have every hope and intention of doing 7 to 12. I've got what I think are some really cool ideas about 7 to 12. 12 in particular, I've thought for a long time, got to be a blues. It's 12 bars, and I'm thinking I take 12 of the houses, everybody gets one chorus, and I change key every chorus. I think it'll be 12 choruses by 12 different people in 12 different keys. I'll write 12 different melodies for the whole thing. It might be the longest piece, like the first one on this record.
Yeah.
By the time I get through that might be, and it might, maybe I'll try not to make it an arduous experience, but I can also switch up the vibe. I won't have 12 people all play at 150 beats per minute. I'll switch it up like.
You have to do it in 12/8.
Yeah, you're right. And that's the thing. That's the other thing where it gets tricky, because I've used time signature all right now. I've been using everything applied to 4. So
Right.
4/4, 5/4, 6/4. So the further I get into this process, it becomes kind of tricky. Because I've written pieces in 9/4 and 11/4. It starts to get weird. That's where I'm most comfortable. Odd time signatures is not really my thing. So I have to figure out how to make that work. But I have every intention and hope and desire to complete what's happening here with part 2.
Well, Matt, do you know what 12 times 12 is?
144.
You know what another name for 144 is?
No.
It's a gross.
That's interesting.
Yeah, 12 dozen equals a gross, 144.
As in David Seagrove.
Interesting.
Thing I've been doing with Ross and Daniel Carter and Matt Gallahan, Paul 144, because it's a gross.
Oh, interesting. I mean, with those two guys, man, that is maximum level.
Yes, it is.
Mac is really, man, he is really something, man. It was really, man, it was such a thing to meet him that day when we were playing and he was playing opposite us. It was such a thing to meet him, such a trip for me to meet him, because as a trumpet player, man, I think people, I don't know what the deal is. People know, or they don't want to say or whatever, but I know that this is one of the most powerful trumpet players that has ever lived. I mean, and I always tell him this. I saw at the Vision Festival one year, Mac was playing with a big band in a big auditorium, and I was in the back of the auditorium. This is a big place. I was all the way at the back wall, and I didn't know it was him. He hit a sound so fat and so big that it literally hit the back wall of the auditorium. I have never experienced that much power. And this was not because he was mic'd up. This was him. When he plays in those small situations like that, he's really reeling himself in. He's playing dynamically in the context of the environment. But this cat has enough power to take out armies, man. As a trumpet player, it's just awesome to see and experience somebody like that. This cat, Mac is just what an original, man. He's that's just a segue of my own into all trumpet players. I just say, I want to keep us on too long, but trumpet players to me are almost like rappers. And I'm a trumpet player myself. We have trumpet power ego stuff going on. And sometimes we have beefs. And sometimes we end up in battles with one another. Like trumpet battles go all the way back to Roy Eldridge versus Charlie Shavers at Jazz in the Philharmonic. And what a battle that was, man. And you have to listen to the audience to see who won. And with Roy Eldridge versus Charlie Shavers, it was who could go higher, who could go louder, and they kept going more and more and more until all of a sudden Charlie Shavers said, forget it, I'm going to end this. And Charlie Shavers hit a note so high and so loud that you could tell the audience decided that he was the winner of that battle. and this was against Roy Eldridge. There's that aspect to the trumpet. In my younger days, I used to do some of that. In my younger days, I used to battle. I'd been destroyed, gone after people and stuff. It's something much more into your energy when you're in your 20s. Yeah. Like the millennials say, you're in beast mode. You're out there. You want to just destroy and try to experience how much power you have and this kind of thing. I don't do that anymore. And somebody like Mac could actually destroy anyone he wanted to at any time, but he doesn't, because he's not on that tip. He's not out to destroy anybody. but if he wanted to, he could.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, by the end of that last piece we did, I was frightened because you guys were hitting some notes there, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
It took a while to get off stage after that because it was very, very powerful. Very cool stuff. Grateful to know all you guys, that's for sure. Even Tom.
Even me. I'm sorry we didn't record that night. We did not record that.
No, unfortunately.
Where was that? No, is that Otto?
No, that was at Otto's
Right,
Shrunken Penis.
Otto's Shrunken Head, yes.
Tom is so hip. He's got a picture of Bitches Brew in the background, both sides.
That's it. Yeah, that's. I bought that in Harlem actually. But anyway, thanks, Matt, for being on the show. We'll see you live soon. And
so on June 22nd, the 12 Houses will be at Shoal Street Studio in Brooklyn. On the 21st, we have the conduction that we were talking about.
Oh, okay.
Great.
So June 21st is the conduction in Astoria Park from it's loosely starting around noon. 12 Houses are playing June 22nd at 9 p.m. at Shoal Street Studio in Brooklyn. On the 23rd, I'll be playing at the Vision Festival, not as a leader, but I'll be playing with Martina Roberts. And the culmination of the festival this year, the next set of that night will be Marshall Allen and the Sun Ra Orchestra celebrating Marshall's 100th birthday. So at that point, we all take a knee like we all should to
all right.
Somebody who's at 100 years old blowing everybody off the stage every day.
Amazing.
Yep.
All right,
Matt. We'll let you know when this is on.
I really appreciate it, guys. Always have a ball with you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
all
same
right.
here.
You will be back. Okay, Matt, take it easy. And thank you, Matt, for being a guest. David, let's talk about the playlist.
It's a great set list. As a matter of fact, we were able to take 4 tunes off of Matt Lavelle and the 12 Houses Crop Circles Part 1. We were able to do Crop Circle number 1, Crop Circle number 2, Crop Circle number 5, and Crop Circle number 6. Then I thought just for a little variation, we do Ghosts by Albert Ayler, followed by Part 3 of John Coltrane's Ascension. We then get into the opening track of Skies of America, Ornette Coleman's fantastic melding of classical and jazz with the London Symphony Orchestra. And we end up in the right spot, another Philadelphia guy just like Matt, Sun Ra with Space is the Place.
All right, great. Once again, my name is Tom Semioli. I am your co-host, and you, sir?
Oh, I'm David C. Gross. You guys know me by now, right?
Right. Okay. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
See ya.